Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner from the Robust Opposition, and I am so thrilled to have Nina Turner with me tonight as my special guest on this show about how these Israel PACs are trying to sabotage progressive women of color and also buy out and out buy house seats. How you doing tonight, Nina?
I'm doing all right, Lauren. How are you?
I'm all right. I've been working all day to prepare for this show. And I even looked up a photo of the first time we met. And I'm going to share it right now with the people. This was at Watkins Park in South LA. And here it is. This was I ran LA for Bernie. As you can see, I got the shirt with a little cannabis leaf there. We used to have an outreach program,
Yes.
dispensaries, because Bernie was the only one who wanted to legalize marijuana. And you were there with one of our groups, Inner City Outreach for Bernie. And it was the first time I ever heard you speak. And it was fantastic because you are so fiery, as everybody knows. And we watched as you supported Senator Sanders during that election, and then you were the co-chair for his campaign in 2020, and you came out for every single progressive cause that we ever supported, and we were so thrilled that you were, running for Marcia Fudge's seat after she got appointed to be Biden's Secretary of Housing. And then, they came in, they sabotaged you. It's only been 2 weeks since your loss. How are you feeling?
Certainly got to process because of what I know happened in the race. So I'm still feeling heavy about what happened because it's not just happening in the 11th Congressional District. Unfortunately, this is happening all over the country. So, Lauren, I'm feeling heavy for the people of my district and also for this nation because all of this kind of stuff is coming to a neighborhood near you. And we already see that. I know you and I are going to talk about the different places where this kind of sabotage, as you lay out, is happening. And the fact that you have outside forces determining who will be in leadership in respective communities that they actually know nothing about. By way of example, Cleveland is the poorest city of its size in the entire United States of America. Imagine what the money over 2 election cycles, and Lauren, you remember the special election last year and this election, if you combine the two, over $6 million was spent trying to defeat me. And they have perfected it so much so they named it. It's called, we're going to do the Ohio 11th on people. And they are doing it all over the country. So I'm feeling heavy.
Yeah.
No. And mad too.
Yeah, you got to be mad.
I'm mad.
Righteous anger. I always say, my ex-boyfriend used to say to me, why are you so angry all the time? Yeah. And I said, if I didn't have righteous anger, I couldn't be an activist.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, tell the viewers why you decided to run for why you decided to run for that congressional seat, and why, because of your deep roots in the community, you were a shoo-in until that money started.
Yeah, to really push to change material conditions, the 11th Congressional District has a history of having fighters. Congressman Louis Stokes, who was the first African-American ever elected to serve in Congress from Ohio, certainly cemented that. His brother, some of your viewers who know the history, some of the political history of Cleveland, may know that Mayor Carl B. Stokes was the first African-American mayor of a major city. So when you think about the genesis of Black politics, especially in the 20th century, roads lead right through the city of Cleveland. And it certainly is a great opportunity in moments where we need to see promise in the problem to stand up and use the skill set that I have, the experiences that I've had, as you laid out on 2 presidential campaigns with Senator Bernie Sanders, to use that cachet to be in service once again to my community. I served as a Cleveland City Councilwoman, also served as an Ohio State Senator. I'm a member of the DNC, all the things. I was a delegate for President Obama twice, well, Senator Obama, then President Obama. So all of my experiences and traveling all over this country, I wanted to use that in an elected space in the halls of Congress to change the material conditions of the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class in my district. And I know by extension that what you do, you're elected from a district, but what you do on the federal level impacts everyone. So Medicare for all, canceling student debt, lowering the prices of prescription drugs, standing side by side with the House of Labor to help people unionize. So these are things, Lauren, that I have not stopped doing those things. And even right after the special election, even though I saw what they did to me, and I was thinking to myself, God, I know they're going to come after me again, but they won't be able to come so hard. And I was wrong. They came even harder, even so much so the president of the United States got into this race. A
Right.
safe Democratic seat. You know why? Because I am a freedom fighting Democrat. I am an unbought and unbossed Democrat. I'm not the kind of Democrat that they want in the halls of Congress, they being the Democratic Party itself. And there was a great article, Lauren, as you know, in the Nation magazine, written by Jeff Weaver, really outlining not only what happened in the 11th Congressional District, but what is poised to happen to progressives moving forward unless we put a stop to it.
Yeah. Now, and Shontel Brown was just like a first-term city councilwoman or something like that. She didn't have nearly your credentials, your experience, your bona fides. Yeah. So
nowhere near.
Now I'm going to get into, with my next guest, Alex Sammon, who's written about this for the American Prospect, exactly who these PACs were. But I've already put here in the subject matter of the show that it was a PAC. They started PACs for the first time. They didn't used to directly contribute to candidates. And they also started a Super PAC and the Democratic Majority for Israel. So they started spending against you. Talk about some of the things they said about you, either overtly through their ads or covertly through this whisper campaign that you talked about to me about the emails. And I know about these emails because my ex-boyfriend joined AIPAC. That's a whole nother show. But, and he would show me some of the emails that they sent back and forth to each other with out and out lies in them. To talk about some of the things they said about you.
Absolutely. And I have Jewish allies, obviously, across the country because I am a national figure. And my Jewish allies shared those emails too. So, Lauren, as you lay out, it's not just what they did to me in my district, but it's also how they have maligned my name in Jewish communities all over the country. AIPAC put out one saying that I was anti-Israel for this round. They sent that email out to fundraise off of me. DMFI, Democratic Majority for Israel, did the same thing last time and also this time too, and raised a whole lot of money. So imagine my chagrin, and I'm keeping it PG, that you would have groups who would just out and out malign, just out and out lie about my position about Israel, but they were able to fundraise and stoke a certain type of fear among certain of the Jewish community. Now, I have Jewish allies, that goes without saying. And but there's a certain segment within the Jewish population who did in fact start to believe those things. I made better ground this time. Imagine having a fight on a front that you never thought. I mean, it's one thing to disagree with me about Medicare for all or canceling student debt or closing the racial wealth gap. It's another thing to totally make something up. And I'm fighting on two terrains. I'm fighting with about what they're saying to me within the Jewish community circles as they slander, malign my name, and then within my district. Now, to get to what they didn't put commercials up, and this group DMFI, the first commercial that they did against Senator Bernie Sanders in the great state of Iowa was after his heart attack. Imagine that. I mean, just think about that. But what they did against me in my district both times was to paint me as an angry Black woman. They used racist tropes against me, a Black woman, and I consider that very much anti-Black. It doesn't matter that my opponent was Black. It was using those tropes. We know that we talk about racism in this country. We don't talk enough about anti-Blackness and also colorism as well, because me being a darker skinned Black woman, how that plays. So they didn't strike me on what they claimed their organization stand for. They struck at me saying that I was not sufficiently loyal to the Democratic Party. And Lauren, for me, what loyalty means is that you're going to push. You don't have to be blindly loyal. And that's why I consider myself a Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm Democrat. I'm unbought and I'm unbossed. And I'm going to do what I think is right for the constituencies that I serve. And so by the fact that Cleveland is the poorest city of its size, what do those constituents need? And also greater Cleveland by extension. They need universal health care. They need jobs that pay a living wage. They need this president to cancel student debt. They need the prescription drug costs to go down. Women need their whole damn dollar. They need to make sure that they extend and protect the child tax credit that they let go by the wayside. These folks spent more money fighting me than they would a cinema or a mansion. And so what I want your viewers to know is that this burden that is put, because they come extraordinarily hard against Black women and other women of color who are progressives. They're doing it all over the country. And people must stand up and push back against this. It is anti-Black.
Okay,
and it's offensive.
Yeah. And so you never said anything.
No.
Anything. There was no posted
No.
petition. There was no a statement that they were able to dredge up in your background. It was all smears and innuendo.
Yeah, I mean, I believe on the Israel front, two-state solution or whatever solution the two peoples agree with, either the Israelis or the Palestinians, that justice and security for both peoples. That's
So
all I've ever.
So you never said they're committing genocide on the Palestinian people. You never said Israel is an apartheid state. You never said, trying to think of some of the other things, a one-state solution. You never came out in support of the BDS movement.
No, I did not, even though there are some Jewish sisters and brothers and family and friends that do believe in the BDS movement. One of my statements was that as I see BDS, I want to bring all the sides together, which is why I did not, I don't support the BDS movement. There's a however to that though, Lauren. I believe that people have the right to peaceably petition the government, and that was a bridge too far for some of them. No, I'm not going to. People have a right to peaceably petition the government, of which the BDS movement, that is something that it pushes for. But no, it was totally manufactured. Mm-hmm. That's what this was. And it was, it definitely worked because the argument was that I was not sufficiently loyal. It doesn't get any more loyal than saying to the Democratic Party that you need to change material conditions for the people who are poor, working poor, and barely middle class. That is what I was fighting for. That's what I will continue to fight for. And I'm really glad to see Justice Democrats, as you know, Lauren, put out a fantastic video debunking all of the things that DMFI and APAC are trying to do to Black women like me and other women of color. Cisneros is going through it. And it wasn't just DMI and the APAC. You also have moderate or neoliberal Democrats joining forces to try to destroy the progressive movement. So it's the confluence of all of those things. And when they strike at leaders like me, they are trying to deflate and trying to really kill the progressive movement by trying to take out leaders like me so that we stop fighting. I want this movement to know we cannot relent. We cannot stop fighting for what is just, for what is right, and for what is good. And that doesn't mean that our movement is perfect. Certainly no individual is perfect, so no movement can be perfect. But what the progressive movement stands for, though, is for justice in all of its forms, for all people being pushed through public policies that will actually lift people.
Yeah. And, it's not even about Jews. It's just about Israel, because one of the people they countered 2 years ago was Sarah Jacobs, who's a Jewish woman. And they supported Georgette Gomez, who's a Latina woman down in San Diego for the congressional seat. But fortunately, Sarah Jacobs is a rich heiress, and she was able to beat them back with her money. But no, you talk to me. It's about these wealthy voices from out of state drowning out, or I think you said diluting, or what was the word you used?
Yeah, pull it up. Yeah, I was in a moment.
And diluting the voices of the working people who live in these communities. And Senator Sanders said something tonight. He was doing a live stream, Get Out the Vote for Nida Allum, who is here in North Carolina's District 4, where she's a Muslim American woman, and they're funding her opponent, who happens to be African American, but, the kind of African American.
But still. Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to share what Bernie had to say here.
Okay.
Because I think he really echoed what you were talking about. And hopefully this is queued up to where it needs to be. Shoot.
In between exams.
Oh no, I lost it. Let's see if it's here.
Just
Okay.
Nida is going to be there. Yeah.
Let's see, where was it? Here, I think it was here.
Taking on the fossil fuel industry and creating millions of jobs through a Green New Deal. They don't want to see the billionaires and large corporations beginning to pay their fair share of taxes. So they don't want, people like Nida in the U.S. Congress. And that is exactly why we have got to elect her. So what tomorrow is about.
Oh no, you know what? He basically, sorry, I thought I had it queued up, my bad.
Oh, that's okay.
Basically, pretty much said exactly what you said about it's really about establishment, all the establishment in interests, whether it's in the
That's
health.
right.
Yeah, exactly. So tell the viewers, I wanted to talk to you. We progressives like to say that people power can beat money power any day of the week.
Yeah.
But based on what happened in your race, do you really believe that's still true?
To a certain extent, I do. Because we have examples throughout history of people power beating back these kinds of forces. We have to recapture it. There's a however to it. Unlike past generations, the onslaught of 24-hour news cycle changes things. Social media certainly changes things. Social media can certainly be used for a tool for good, but it also could be used as a tool to manipulate as well. And so we must deal with the 21st century variables that we face with the people power, and we must have the money too, because you need money for the mission. And so when we have organizations that, as we forge and bring our money and our synergy, having a synergy together as a movement, we do have to have money for the mission, Lauren. There's no doubt about it. So it can't be people power alone. We have to have money for the mission, or they're going to continue to crush us in the way that they're doing. Absolutely. You got to have both. It can't be just one without the other, especially in the 21st century. But I don't want people to lose hope or heart. Hope is an action word. It is. And so bringing awareness, as you're doing on your show, as the Justice Democrats did with that wonderful video, The Nation magazine, I encourage your viewers to go and read that article that was penned by Jeff Weaver. I know another one of your guests has written a strong article. A lot of people are speaking out about it. People like Marianne Williamson as well, using her. So there are a lot of people who are bringing this to the attention of folks, so people will know exactly what these folks are doing, and let it be done in the daylight. Let folks know so that people start to question this. But going back to your question, in this moment, we got to have people power, and we also need money for the mission. Got to have it.
Now, Justice Democrats did spend for you in the special election, but they didn't. They stayed out of the general.
They did.
And they said, we have to reserve our scant resources for where we think it can be effective. Did that rationale make sense to you? Did you accept that?
I mean, their organization, they made their decision, but no, it doesn't make sense, because when people come after a national leader like me, as Alan Minsky has said, the ripple effect from my win would have been able to push and help other candidates. That we have lots of talented progressive candidates, no doubt about it, and committed progressive candidates, but not every candidate is me, in that I have this national profile from traveling all over this country in 2016 and in 2020 with Senator Bernard Sanders, and being a leader in my own right in this movement. And see, they knew that. And that's why they came so hard against me. Yeah. Because they want to stop the tide. That's what they're trying to do. And so the thought process, if we can kill Nina Turner, then we're going to dash the dreams and the hopes of anybody else in this movement. And the other chilling effect too, Lauren, that I want people to pay attention, because I know this is bigger than me. I'm the conduit. This is bigger than me. But also stop other progressives from daring to get in at all. Because if you're a progressive, you might say, why would I even run? Look what they did to Nina Turner, a giant in this movement. Look what they did to India Walton in Buffalo, New York. Look what they're doing to Summer or Nida and many, many others. So it is to try to stop us, not just the individuals that they are targeting, but also to kill the movement. And we must not get weary in well-doing. We cannot let that happen. And that is why we need people power, but we got to have money power too.
Now, AOC turned out to be the only squad member who endorsed you. How did that make you feel? You told Jordan Chariton they were threatened. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, we gotta, the squad members have to answer that for themselves in terms of why they didn't come. Yes, Congresswoman AOC came, and I thank her for that. Senator Bernie Sanders was right there with me both times from the beginning, very supportive of each other. We are, because we started on this journey together. The Progressive Democratic Caucus went totally in the opposite direction, knowing full well that the person they endorse is not a progressive by any stretch of the imagination, actually is a member of both caucuses, the Progressive Caucus and the Blue Dem Conservative Caucus or Corporatist Caucus.
The New Democrats.
Yeah, the New Democrats. Thank you. You can't do that. You can't be both. You got to pick a side on this. I will say that we had progressive leadership all over the country who got together, from California to Nevada to Iowa to New Mexico. Leaders, there's about 12 of them. Even PDA and also Netroots joined that too, to say Nina Turner is the real progressives and we're not playing with feckless politicians. So I really want to thank those progressive leaders from all over the country, Lauren, who got together for the very first time and penned a letter on my behalf as a group. And I hope that they stay together, because more progressive leaders and champions are going to need them. But I do believe, had there been more of a coalescing in that way, in the same way it happened in 2021 during the special election, had there been more of a coalescing, we might have. No, I mean, we're playing this. We don't know. We might have been able to stem the tide. And they didn't come into this race for nothing. They came into this race because I was winning. I had the best ground game, Lauren, because I learned a lot from the first race. What I didn't have was the same level of resources that I had the first time. And if I could have combined the level of resources that I had with the knowledge and the new focus on the ground game that my team had. So the outcome is no reflection on the work that was put in on the ground to try to win this election. Is no reflection. And that's another point.
Shout out to Katie Myers on that one, right?
Oh yeah, Katie, Naomi, my campaign manager, Turrentine did a fantastic. The entire team did a magnificent job. They poured their heart out, Lauren. We had Naomi was a campus coordinator because college students were in play. Those college students from Case Western Reserve to Cleveland State University. I want to lift those young people. They did that. They got out there. We had people knocking doors 6 days a week, but I got outspent on TV 50-1. You hear me? So elections are no longer being won at the ballot box. They're being won in boardrooms. And that's what we need the folks to know.
Right.
And this is bad for democracy. No matter which candidate you choose, I wouldn't have wanted that to be spent on my side. You understand? Yeah. I would have said no, because it drowns out the voices of the people who live in these specific districts who should have a right to choose their leaders.
Absolutely.
Without outside forces coming in to manipulate the election process. Now, those same forces are not going to come in to feed any of Cleveland's children. Mm-hmm. They don't care that parents need to make a living wage to take care of their kids. They don't care about the folks there who are saddled with college debt. They don't care about women getting their whole damn dollar. See, they came in. You had the oligarchy, from cryptocurrency billionaire to oil baronesses who fund these efforts, and they're just coming in and manipulating these communities in this way so that they can get the leaders they want. Not the leaders that those communities deserve, but the leaders that they want. And guess what? There's nothing so spectacular about the candidates that they're backing. The only thing is they want to be able to pick up the phone and get a return on their investment. That's what this is about.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Nina. And my last question, because I know you have to go, but you said on Jordan Chariton, you said you are unleashed. And I want to know, I'm asking you point blank, are you planning to run for president as an independent in 2024?
What I am planning to do at this particular moment is to travel all over this country, awakening sleeping giants. You know, I am a member of the Democratic Party, have been so. I am a member of the DNC, all of the things. I don't even know. I'm not about to run down my Democratic bona fides here because that didn't matter. None of that mattered, right, Lauren? It didn't matter that I was a delegate for Senator Obama, then President Obama. It didn't matter that I was the minority whip for my caucus in the Ohio Senate. Hello? It didn't matter that I was a Democratic nominee, and you remember this in 2014 when I ran for Secretary of State to take on one of the worst secretaries of state in the entire United States of America, putting my last term in the Senate, because we have term limits, on the line to fight a larger fight. And Democrats got killed all across the country in 2014, but I made that sacrifice. See, none of that mattered because these organizations were able to sufficiently, even though they were wrong, but their tactic to try to take away my Democratic bona fides. And unfortunately, members in my community started to believe that stuff, even though if you just look at my record, it is wrong. And I challenged the Democratic Party because I wanted to be better. We got two-party system, two major parties. We got one party that's lost its ever-loving mind, and we got another one that doesn't know how to deal with power when they get it, to change material conditions. One of these parties are going to have to do right by the people, Lauren. And I, for one, I want it to be the Democratic Party. I want the Democratic Party to go back, not all the way back to its roots, because it was a Dixiecrat party. It was the party of slave owner if we go too far back. But I want it to go back to the FDR.
Right. I always thought that if Bernie had called himself an FDR-style Democrat rather than a democratic socialist, he might have had more of a chance. But who knows? I mean, we could see it doesn't matter what you call yourself.
Right.
The fealty that he's shown to the Democratic Party, going out and stumping for them.
That's right.
Even after they cheated him in 2016, right? Even after that. And then he wins Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada. California. There's never been a candidate in history who has not become the president when they've won all three of those races. And so then Obama, our great misleader, right? I taught you that word today.
You did.
A misleader comes in and tells Buttigieg and Klobuchar to drop out and endorse Biden. And then, of course, Clyburn, another misleader, does his thing in South Carolina. And I don't know. It's like there's so many people. You know this, Nina. I even told Bernie when I met him the first time in 2011. It was the first time I heard him speak in person. And I heard him speak, and it had the same effect that hearing you speak. I mean, such a great orator. And I said, my question was, would you challenge Obama in the 2012 primary? And his answer, I'll never forget how he said it. It was like, no. And I knew that he was just loyal, even though he never joined the Democratic Party, he was loyal. He would never challenge a sitting, Democratic incumbent. And yet they tried to smear him with that.
They did.
And then I asked him, I went up to Richmond to meet him in 2014 when he came to endorse the Richmond Progressive Alliance. And I said to him, would you consider running in 2016 as an independent? And he said to me, other people have told me that, but, I will consider it. So he didn't answer me. But then when he ran as a Democrat, Chris Hedges has said it's because he didn't want to be Ralph Nadered, because they blame Ralph Nader, even though he didn't score the election. And then
he did not.
When I saw him in 2016, the night before the Democratic primary in California, I waited for 2 hours so I could be in the front of the row. And I had an article for Karina, Driscoll, his daughter-in-law, about how Nader didn't cost the election. And Kevin Zeese had written an article about how the vast plurality of Americans were independent. So there was this rumor going around that Comey was going to indict Hillary, but he was going to wait until after the convention, and so that they could put in someone other than Bernie. So I practiced what I could say because he was going down the line shaking hands, and I practiced what I could say in just a few seconds. And so there's a picture of me whispering in his ear, and what I said was, Bernie, if they try to steal the election from you, run with Jill, you can win. Because remember, Jill Stein had invited him to be the president and the Green Party ticket.
Yeah, and this brings me to something else. We as a country have to know that the voters of this people deserve so much more than what they're getting. And if we believe in choice, like true choice, reproductive health choice of candidates, then we should not allow people to throw other folks under the bus because they exercise their political choice. Some of the, I mean, even Susan Sarandon, Lauren, the way they do, my dear friend, Susan Sarandon, hell, if I had known that my friend had that much power,
Yeah.
you know, I would have won. I mean, they blame her for everything instead of putting the blame where it belongs.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party needs to do a better job of not protecting the people who have the most power and the most wealth. They need to do something to protect the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class in this country. And then they will win elections. But, you know, they will unite. Because another point I want your viewers to know is that this is not, these organizations that you and I are talking about are more Republican-controlled organizations. AIPAC, for example, supported over 100 Republican candidates that do not believe that Joe Biden is the duly elected president. Yeah. And then y'all got a nerve to run ads against me and say I'm not sufficiently loyal. Let me tell you something. I don't worship human beings. I don't worship any man or any woman. I worship God and I serve the people. Nobody has to be blindly loyal. People are suffering, Lauren, in this country. Gas. Are you kidding me? I was talking to my brother just a couple of days ago. I don't know how people who are poor are making it every single day. Food, eggs, milk, everything. And we take that for granted. So instead of them putting all their venom on a progressive like me, a freedom fighting progressive like me, imagine what people could do to take some of the burden off of people who are suffering in this country, who can't make it every single day. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is unacceptable. And our very democracy, those folks are some of those folks are even Trump Republicans. All they got to do is go look up the record of the people who were donating to my opponent. Some of those people are Trump Republicans. And then you got the nerve to question who is the real Democrat. See, the real Democrat stands up for the democratic values that we say we believe in. That is what Senator Bernard was fighting for in 2016 and 2020. And even right now, he holds up the mantle better than most neoliberal Democrats, including Manchin and Sinema. But make no mistake, there are people hiding behind them. So to put that venom on people like me or Summer Lee or Nida and so many others, and Erica Smith is another example. So they come hard after Black women. Is that okay? They come hard after other women of color who are progressive. It is not okay.
Right.
And we need to call it what it is. And Lauren, I'm so glad that you're doing this show. I really appreciate you and your viewers taking the time. And I want them to read the articles. I can't wait to hear the other interviews that you're going to do tonight. Some incredible articles are being written right now as this is being exposed for exactly what it is. I feel sorry for my community that is mostly poor. Was a majority Black district. It's still a minority district. But we know that when it comes to social ills, we do know that the Black community suffers in a deeper way. But all working class people, no matter how they identify, who are poor and getting a raw deal in this economy, that's what I stand up for, Lauren. And that is why I challenge my party.
Yeah. So I guess the answer is you are not going to run as an independent, because you probably heard the same thing from Jeff Weaver that he told me when I met with him. After that thing, I had a whole list of things that I thought the campaign could have done better, and I went right through it. We met it. He gave me 75 minutes at Union.
I know you had a list, Lauren. You always have a list.
And I said, why didn't he run as an independent? And he said to me, and it was the first argument that sort of convinced me. He said, well, look, you may be right. There may be more independents than there are Democrats and Republicans, but you got to figure, all the Democrats are probably going to, the stalwart Democrats are going to vote for Hillary, or at least the majority of them are. And the independents, more of them go with the libertarians. Gary Johnson got more votes than, say, Jill Stein. So what he convinced me by doing the numbers was that Bernie running as an independent would just elect the Republican. And you know how Bernie did not want Trump. I mean, he just
no, that Trump was his thing, Lauren. That was really, the senator said that to me many times, and others who are on his team. He did not want to see a neo-fascist remain in office. That was vitally important. So even him in that type of sacrifice, and he's still fighting the good fight right now to this very day.
Yeah,
he is. But our movement, no individual is bigger than the movement. Not me, not the senator, not anybody. And so I do Lauren, want to encourage this movement to keep on keeping on. I really do.
Yeah.
And to the organizations in the movement, we got to do a better job of being more agile and being more organized, and never doubt what the other side is willing to do to take us out. Like, we got to get that fight and that bite, Lauren. We can't play games with it. They will do anything, as we see, to defeat us, even uniting with Trump Republicans.
Right.
That's real. That's real. But I want people to. Yeah,
I'm going to
go
post
ahead.
that article that you referenced that Jeff Weaver just published today in The Nation. But one phrase I noted that he said was, we need a more robust, coordinated effort. And when he used the word coordination, I like, oh my God, the left uniting. The right is so good at uniting because they're authoritarian and they tend to follow their leader and they put aside all these little petty squabbles. The left doesn't do it, and it's too bad, you know?
It's not too late, Lauren. It's not too late for us to do it, because if we don't do it, we're going to keep getting what we're getting, and only very few progressives are going to make it through. Can you imagine if every progressive candidate, or close to every progressive candidate, won in this midterm election cycle? Can you imagine the change that we could amass? See, that's what they're afraid of, and that's why they come at us like this. But they come at certain people harder. And again, I'm going to say Black women and other women of color get it harder than anybody else. Yeah. And they ain't got to take my word for it. Check the record of what they did and what they said. And I'm sick and tired of Black women being treated like this. Progressive Black women.
Because Valerie
freedom
Foushee,
fighting,
who we're going to be talking about, you know, this election is tomorrow. Valerie Foushee.
Freedom fighting progressive Black women are treated any kind of way, and nobody should stand for unbossed Black women.
I want you to know that Shirley Chisholm, I was too young to vote, but she was the first presidential candidate that I would have voted for if I was old enough to vote. She was a great inspiration to me. But Nina, you are a great inspiration to the entire progressive community, and I know how badly you must be feeling, and it hurt all of our hearts to see them do you like that. And so just know how much you're loved by the entire progressive community, and hopefully that can sustain you.
It will, and I'm not going anywhere. They just, my fight, I mean, they just, the fight that I'm feeling right now is going to continue. They just cemented my resolve.
Yeah.
Trust that, not going anywhere. So I'm looking forward to seeing people all over this country. And we are going to awaken some sleeping giants. And Lauren, just thank you so much for what you do. And then your other guests that are going to be joining you a little later. See, we all have a role to play. We need to play our role. I don't want people to get weary. You can be mad and disappointed and even sad, because I like how are you feeling? You know, this don't feel good to have people come at you this way. It doesn't feel good. But I tell you this, there is, when ordinary people put a little extra on their ordinary, extraordinary things can and will happen. And so we let them win if we stop fighting. So I don't want this movement. We're not going to get weary and well doing. We're going to win some and we're going to lose some, but we must keep forging ahead. And we must do it in a very strategic way, more strategic than we ever have. They got their plan. They calling this plan the Ohio 11 plan, and trying to duplicate it all over the country. We must get our plan together and execute it too. Baby, it may seem they winning right now, but that just because that's the reality right now does not mean it has to be the reality going into the future. So let's keep the faith and keep the fight, Lauren. I ain't going nowhere, baby. I'm coming to a neighborhood near you.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to you. And I just want to let viewers know we're continuing on in our show with Alex Sammon from the American Prospect. He's going to be talking about these groups in great detail. And then we have Rebecca Cerese and Ryan Jenkins from North Carolina to talk about two races that they've targeted. They're going to be decided tomorrow. And that's NC1 and NC4. So I'll let you go, Nina.
All righty. Bye-bye.
We're here in North Carolina. She's here in North Carolina. So now I'm going to bring in... First, I'm going to bring in Alex Sammon. Hi, Alex. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, Lauren.
Thank you for standing by while we talk to the indomitable Nina Turner. I just love her. She gave me a lot longer than she said she would, so I apologize about that. But anyway, how about you? You've written an article for the American Prospect called, as she was saying, the Ohio model for purging progressives. And it had this paragraph, which I thought was great. Like a scout team checking for favorable battlefield terrain, DMFI's success gave way to much bigger and deeper pocketed groups flooding House primaries. Overwhelming the progressive small donor strategy. If Turner had held off Brown, maybe the corporate money train would have been seen as a losing proposition. But Brown's victory gave the establishment proof of concept, I love that term, and major momentum. And as the primary season heats up in the next few months, because tomorrow is not the end of it, outside money is likely to be the defining feature of Democratic politics in this cycle. So they are coming into Democratic primaries in safe Democratic seats. Talk about how much, well, first of all, let's identify who these groups are, how many races they've gone into, how much money they've spent, who comprises them, who donates to them, and what is their ostensible purpose? And I can repeat those things again, but first let's just talk about who they are.
Yeah, sure. So the two super PACs in question that have kind of played the biggest role so far in the cycle are the Democratic Majority for Israel PAC, DMFI, which you guys have obviously mentioned repeatedly already, and then the other is United Democracy Project. I think UDP is the acronym. It's a super PAC that was founded by AIPAC. So they're two massive super PACs. They're incredibly well funded, and they're ostensibly pro-Israel political committee outfits basically, and they have also these other. I mean, I should probably say they also have these other offshoots, which is there's another PAC called Mainstream Democrats PAC, which isn't explicitly allied with the Israel lobby, but is functionally being run by the same people. They rent office space and use web hosting services provided by DMFI. Protect Our Future PAC is another crypto PAC that's closely allied. So there are a number of organizations, but I think the two really salient ones here are DMFI and UDP.
Okay, now how much money have they spent altogether, would you say, and how many races? Because we talked about Nina's, we talked about Jessica Cisneros in Texas running against Henry Cuellar, who's anti-choice, the only anti-choice Democrat left. Erica Lee and Nida Allum here in North Carolina. Summer Lee in Pennsylvania. Am I missing any?
I think those are the big ones. I think in Oregon also the race between Kurt Schrader, who's the incumbent there, and his opponent, whose name is escaping me for the time being. Her name is I'll have to pull it up. But yeah, that's another race where we've seen Mainstream Democrats PAC get involved. The other two PACs haven't been. Sorry, Jamie McLeod Skinner. But yeah, that's a pretty exhaustive list.
Mm-hmm. And how much money have they spent?
Yeah, it's one of these things that's sort of constantly updating. We can only keep track of this stuff at the clip at which it gets filed, and I've obviously been looking at these FEC filings every day. The top line number that we've seen so far, according to Open Secrets, is that there's $53 million have been spent in Democratic primaries so far in this cycle. We haven't really started even voting yet. That's 10 times what it was at this point in the 2018 midterm. So it's a shocking amount of money for this stage of the election cycle. The overwhelming majority of it has been from these conservative Democratic groups, and I can kind of rattle them off based on PAC and contribution, but just to give a sense of kind of where we're at, the United Democracy Project, so AIPAC, Super PAC, has put up at last filing was $1.2 million for Henry Cuellar in Texas 28. They put up $2.3 million for Steve Irwin against Summer Lee in Pennsylvania 12. They put up $2.3 million for Don Davis against Erica Smith in North Carolina's first district. They put up $2 million for Valerie Foushee in North Carolina's 4th district. That's against Nida Allum. And DFMI, same sort of thing. The numbers are slightly smaller, but they put up $500,000 for Don Davis in North Carolina's 1st. They put up almost 300 for Senator Foushee in the 4th in North Carolina, and they put up 305,000 at last call for Steve Irwin in Pennsylvania 12. So, we can keep going and going, but that's kind of where we're at. It's going to, once these numbers really settle in, once election day is behind us, we'll see those numbers jump up again for sure, because now every ad space on TV is going to be booked out by one of these groups, basically.
Yeah, speaking about ads, you wrote another article about the ad that they actually pulled off the airways in North Carolina, which they never do because they were worried about defamation. I mean, that's really a hard thing to prove, defamation, but this thing was so egregious. Do you want to talk about that relating to Erica Smith?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting because, it continues to be a really contentious issue. I wrote the piece on Friday. DFMI PAC reached out to me immediately and said that it was, that it was incorrect, that the ads hadn't come down. The Smith campaign, was steadfast that the bookers at these stations had indeed, told them that the ad was coming down. So you can look at the showrunners list and see where it's running and where it hasn't been running, and it's really hard to get these things taken down on a permanent basis. So it shows you kind of the difficulty there. You can say almost anything in political advertising, as we all know. But yeah, it's interesting because, right, usually those takedown requests don't have legs because it's so hard to violate the almost non-existent campaign finance law that we have in this country. And it's actually the second time we've seen an ad get flagged like that for takedown and have some follow through. So we saw that also in the Pennsylvania Senate race between Connor Lamb and John Fetterman, similar dynamic, where Lamb Super PAC put an ad buy up that was informed by this red boxing tactic that these super PACs and campaigns use to collaborate, and it was incorrect.
Talk about that red boxing tactic, because reading these articles was the first I ever heard about that, because everybody knows, just so you know, a political action committee can contribute directly to a candidate. They have limits in how much they can give, but a super PAC can give unlimited. Well, actually, they can bundle. The PACs can bundle, and therefore they can get around the limits because they bundle what each individual can give. But the super PACs can give unlimited. The only thing is they are not supposed to coordinate with the campaigns. So tell about this red box technique and how they coordinate with the campaigns.
Right. So this is one of those things that has grown out of the Citizens United Supreme Court decision that basically got rid of almost all the campaign finance law that we had in this country. One of the few things that was left in place was the notion that super PACs can spend an unlimited amount so long as they aren't openly collaborating with the campaign that they're supporting. And obviously the red boxing has been pioneered as a workaround to this very, very minimal regulation. And so what a campaign will do is they will put the messaging that they want in an ad spot on their website. They'll make it very prominently placed. They'll put it oftentimes inside a red box, so it's unmissable. And the super PAC that's raising copious money for them will go to the website. They'll copy paste the messaging. They'll work it up into an ad, and they'll buy ad space, and they'll run the ad, relentlessly on TV, on digital, you name it. And it's something that we actually hadn't seen a ton of. It's surprising. It's something of a novelty. We didn't see a lot of it until I think until Nina Turner's race in Ohio 11. That was really prominent. The Shontel Brown campaign made these extremely explicit pleas to DFMI DMFI to run ads with this messaging, and they obviously did it. And then now we've seen it really propagate. So in the case of this ad in question in North Carolina's 1st district, Don Davis's website has a very clear red box section that informed the ad. Connor Lamb's, his campaign had a very obvious red box section that informed their ad that got taken down, or their super PAC's ad that got taken down. And if you look at any of these races, you'll see quite clearly under any of the media tab or the messaging tab on these websites exactly what they want put up there, and it becomes super PAC campaign fodder immediately, and they can flog it endlessly because they have obviously the sort of financial resources that these campaigns don't have. Yeah.
So because you didn't mention, I'll just mention it real briefly. What they were saying about Erica Smith was that she had endorsed a Trump supporting Republican. And that was something that continued to dog her when she announced her run for Senate, which she did last year before this congressional seat opened up because of the incumbent retired. When I interviewed her last year when she was running for Senate, there were a lot of people here in Asheville, a lot of liberals that thought that she also endorsed this Republican and never forgave her for it. And all she did was say something like she supported this woman's values because she was a fellow church member or fellow minister, because I think Erica was also a minister. And so it was just completely misconstrued. And she even put out a statement, like you said in your article, that I have not endorsed anyone. So I don't know how more explicit she could be. Now, we're going to talk about this race with my next guest, but this about Nida Allum here. According to Daniel Moran's article, which he wrote, you talk about these are ever changing. He wrote this article in April. I forget the date, but April 1, she was leading in the fundraising. And then, so this is how last minute their money was. Then the money came pouring in. He wrote that AIPAC bundled more than half of Valerie Foushee's, that's the candidate that they're supporting, $320,000. And the Super PAC spent $720,000 in airtime. Now that's just under $1 million. But tonight on that call with Bernie Sanders, Nida said they now have spent $3 million. So this is how fast and how furious they're spending this money, that the Assembly, which is, the publication that covers everything in Raleigh, they wrote, that this is the most expensive Senate seat in the history of North Carolina. They called their article, that they're buying, House seat, that they're buying a seat, and that's what they're doing. So who are these people? Because it's not just the Israel supporting PACs, it's also the crypto PAC, and there's also this pandemic supporting people fighting pandemic supporting PAC. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So there are some, there are some common names. I think that the name that's most commonly associated with DMFI is Stacey Schusterman, who's an oil baroness. She's a major donor to DMFI. She's been closely involved with AIPAC for a long time. You'll see her name all over this stuff. Gary Lauder is another big name for DMFI, who comes from the SD Lauder fortune. You've seen a number of large sort of financial services groups, capital group companies, and Linden Capital Partners are top donors to those groups. And as you kind of start going down the list there, Reid Hoffman is one name that's kind of newly involved in this space. He's a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He was involved with LinkedIn, as I recall, and he put up $10 million for Mainstream Democrats PAC, which is obviously just an adjunct association to DMFI at this point. Sam Bankman-Fried is someone who runs a crypto exchange, and he has put up a pretty sizable amount of money for Protect Our Future PAC, which purports to be obviously a pandemic preparedness and effective altruism PAC, but of course is being run nothing like that. So it's a sort of, it's a combination of financiers and oil and gas money, and we've seen, some big tech money as well. The Viterbi family, which is another big tech and engineering family associated with Qualcomm, has put a lot of money into DMFI as well. So, it's kind of a smattering of donors, and some of them are new and, kind of new players in this realm, and some of them are kind of old and familiar. And yeah, obviously it's a very formidable operation. And, given the effect that they had on that Ohio 11 race, that these groups have been able to pitch very rich donors and say, look, we know we can do this. We know that, A, that advertising works, B, that with enough money, we can move enough voters to change the outcome of a race like this. And C, that, in an election cycle like this, it's really hard to raise enough small dollar donations to offset that impact, especially in the final weeks of a race. So it's this sort of equation that they've perfected, and now they're really trying on a large scale.
Yeah. So we have this term called Astroturf Groups, which is like communities for a better environment, which is really like a gas company or something like that. Well, these are like Astroturf PACs, or they come up with some ostensible reason, like it's for Israel or it's for, pandemic, but it's really just a lot of business interests ganging up together and using our weakened campaign finance system to attack progressives. And they're doing it in the primaries because we have so much gerrymandering now that whoever wins the primary is really going to be the one, in a Democratic seat, for instance, is really going to be the one who gets elected in November. Would you concur with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. I mean, the other thing is that the Democratic Party, especially the House Democratic Caucus, is so old. They're very, very old, and they're staring down the reality of being in the minority for quite a while. I mean, this is something that everyone in the party is aware of. And so you've had a huge wave of retirements. So, there's a lot of octogenarians in the party who have said, the idea of spending, have insinuated at least that the idea of spending the last years of their life in the minority of this of Congress, getting nothing done, is not an alluring way to spend your final days on this earth. So you see a lot of retirements, and that means that there's a lot of opportunity to change the composition of this party for a long time. I mean, this is the sort of thing where it's a real resetting of the power centers in the Democratic Party. And so, progressives knew this was an opportunity, but obviously so did moderates and conservatives and big business, and so the idea that you can, buy off some of these vacated seats that have been, made available by retirements is a huge opportunity in both directions. And so now that's part of the reason you see as well. Yeah, there are very few competitive, Democrat versus Republican toss-up seats in this country anymore because of gerrymandering. So the game is now inside these primaries, and then also, the chance to refashion the nature of the caucus is a really substantial opportunity for either side here, and that's, I think, part of the reason too we're seeing so much money put into it.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, to bring in my guests from North Carolina to talk about how this is affecting them on a local level and what they're doing to fight back, is there anything else? Are you working on any other articles? Are you going to continue to follow this story?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I think it's really interesting to me for a number of reasons. Obviously, we talked about realignment, political realignment constantly, and the sort of shifting tectonic plates here in both parties. It's something that I've covered for a couple of cycles now. We'll certainly be covering closely in the next couple of days and all through the rest of this election cycle. And yeah, I think it's I think it's one of the most important sort of stories that we should be following closely. I mean, it's really a critical one. So I'll be doing it. I'll be keeping on it as much as I can.
Do you think any of these people that we've talked about tonight, or who they've spent so heavily against, are going to beat the odds and win?
It's a great question. I don't know. I'm sure the guests who are coming after me will know better about what's going on in North Carolina than I do. I have my sort of hunches about which way this will break. I mean, I think that probably what happens is a couple of these progressives will prevail, and and a lot of them will not. But it's really hard to know. And local networks really count for a lot. Experience running against the sort of local machine or against the local business community or whatever really counts for a lot. So each of these races have their own particularities, just like Nina Turner's race had a very specific set of details, and that can change the result, especially in a close race. So I don't know. I don't think it'll be a total washout. I don't think it'll break. I don't think progressives are going to break out and win every one of these either. But I also, these predictions always come back to bite me, so I'm hesitant to make them.
Well, I won't make you then. But anyway, people can follow you at Alex_Sammon on Twitter, and also read the excellent American Prospect in print. Some people still do publicize a print edition of their publication, and that's one of them. So thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lauren.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to add to my stream Ryan Jenkins and Rebecca Cerese. Thank you so much for waiting so patiently for this entire hour, but I'm sure you were listening to the show. To introduce, Ryan Jenkins is the president of the North Carolina Progressive Caucus of the Democratic Party. Rebecca Cerese, I guess are you on the platform committee of that party? You're the president of the Progressive Democrats of Orange County.
Yes.
I know that much. And you also work for the North Carolina Justice Center. That's your day job. What's your day job, Ryan? I don't think I ever asked you.
I sell life insurance, so about as anti-progressive as you can get.
Okay, well, we won't dwell on that.
Appreciate it. I am trying to leave.
Yeah, let's talk about these two races here. First of all, we have NC1, which is Erica Smith's race. And she, as I mentioned earlier, was running for Senate. But then they cleared the field, and you guys can talk about how you feel about that, for Sherry Beasley. No, she doesn't want to talk about that. Jeff Jackson was also running for that seat, and he left to also run for Congress. But Erica is running for the retiring, is that Butterfield or Price?
Butterfield.
Yeah. And then the other race is NC4, which is Nida Allum, Nida, I guess, the Muslim American woman who is a Bernie Sanders volunteer. And she is in a field of other progressives, so why don't you talk about the composition of this race and what happened after Nida decided to take the PAC money? Who wants to talk about the composition of the race?
Rebecca, you want to handle that, or should I?
You can go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. So the composition of the race is Rebecca and I are both on the endorsements committee, by the way. So we've had to go through hundreds of candidates together. And that's fun. But the race is interesting because there are a couple political newcomers who are academics. You have Richard Watkins, who's a virologist and UNC professor. You have Ashley Ward, who's an environmental scientist. You also have some longtime public servants. You have, of course, Valerie Foushee. You have Nida Allum, who is newer to being a public servant, but has really been doing it and really been spectacular. Okay, hold on.
Clay
Aiken, who's actually really, really cool and been politically involved for a long time. You have Stephen Valentino, who's a retired Army officer, State Department employee. And you have Crystal Cavalier, who's a Native American political activist. And I believe Matt Groom is the last one. I feel proud that I've remembered that many.
Impressive, Ryan.
Yeah.
But Nida was the one who really took off. And
She was the front runner.
Got Bernie Sanders' endorsement and was leading in the fundraiser, as I mentioned earlier, by April 1st. And then these PACs came in and started spending against her. So when that happened, what was your guys' response there?
I'm going to toss that to you, Rebecca.
Okay, sure. So like Ryan said, there were lots of great people in this race. And several of them tried to get our endorsement as the Progressive Caucus. What we ended up doing is, because there were so many good progressives, we decided to give 5 of them, our progressive seal, saying that we believed they were progressive. And that's not because there weren't more progressives. Those were the only 5 that actually applied out of that long group that Ryan talked about. And it was like Richard Watkins, Ashley Ward, Valerie Foushee, Clay Aiken, and Nida Allum. And then we found out about the APAC money, and then that put us in a spot where we had to make a difficult decision. Valerie Foushee is running on a progressive platform. She's done a lot of amazing work. She's been a public servant her whole life. She's been our state senator in Orange County for a really long time. And that's why it was even more disappointing that she ended up taking this money from this right-wing group that endorsed insurrectionists, endorsed people that wanted to overthrow the democratically elected president, Joe Biden. And, we were I'll speak for myself. I was devastated about it because it's just not what I expected. And as a progressive who's very intent on fighting, money in politics and the influence of money in politics, I felt like we had to take a stand. And so did the entire Progressive Caucus. So we made a very difficult decision to actually take our progressive seal away from Senator Foushee. She's a state senator. That's why I call her Senator Foushee. And, I stand by that decision. Again, it's not personal exactly. It's based on this decision that she made, unfortunately, to take this money. And it was so much money. It was more than 50% of her first quarter fundraising. And quite frankly, she has tons of name recognition. She is very well regarded, and I think could have won anyway on her own.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I don't understand. And is very upsetting to me personally.
Now, Ryan, tell us what she said about PACs.
So part of the endorsement committee was the wonderful job of being president means I get to have the awkward conversations. And so they asked me to call Valerie Foushee, who, again, I live in Durham County. She's someone I've worked with before, and I had tremendous respect for her. So I want to echo what Rebecca said there, especially the part about being personally hurt. So I called her, and I was like, hey, and I tried to give every out possible. It was almost a comedic conversation, like, yeah, you're taking the money, but, hey, maybe they just dumped the money in your account, whatever. And it literally came down to, she said, I'm 100% pro APAC. And I was like, damn it, Valerie, why? Sorry to curse.
But I'm asking you what she said about PACs beforehand.
Oh, beforehand, she said, I'm trying to do it verbatim, but essentially she said, taking PAC money is disgusting, it's anti-democratic, and it makes whoever does it totally untrustworthy. And she's absolutely right about all of those.
Right. Okay. So a woman who says that and then takes this kind of money, doesn't that make you worry about, if she's going to backtrack on that, maybe she'll backtrack on Medicare for all if enough people pressure her. Maybe she'll backtrack on the Green New Deal if enough people pressure her.
Absolutely. I've actually heard people say this is the Valerie Nida Allum situation is one of a progressive and ultra progressive, and it's not. That's bullshit. It's a situation between someone who wraps themselves in a progressive mantle when it's easy and beneficial for them, and then throws it into the dirt and trods all over it the second it becomes a difficult thing or weighs them down.
Yeah.
Someone who actually is a progressive. Like, I cannot trust Valerie Foushee at all, and I don't think any progressive can.
Right. Now, I want to talk about Erica Smith, but first I want to get back to, it kind of relates to Erica Smith because it has to do with Emily's list. There was this article that I was reading, I think it was in the Huffington Post, where you were extensively quoted by Daniel Marans, a second progressive activist who didn't want to be named told HuffPost that after AIPAC's support for Foushee came to light, she wrote to Emily's list to complain about their endorsement of Foushee because of the PAC money. So this year, this progressive activist plans to send the money she would typically give to Emily's list to Erica Smith's campaign. And how this relates to Erica Smith's campaign is Erica Smith is pro-choice, and she's running against this Don Davis, who is anti-choice, and yet, so Emily's list endorses in the Foushee race, but doesn't endorse Erica in the race where she's actually running against an anti-choice candidate. So what do you guys make of that? Do you have any contacts with Emily's list or any local members of Emily's list that you've talked to about this?
We got those to Rebecca.
I have not talked to Emily's list, but I'm not surprised. Emily's list has traditionally backed status quo establishment candidates and not backed progressive candidates. So I was not at all surprised about this. I think it's gross. I think Erica Smith absolutely deserved the endorsement for many reasons. I just think she's a better candidate overall. She's also served in state government. She's fantastic. She got completely screwed by the Democratic Party in 2020 in the Senate race. She ran against Cal Cunningham. She would have been 1,000 times better candidate than Cal Cunningham. And Chuck Schumer came in and just the establishment Democrats just decided they were going to go with the boring, mediocre white guy who ended up, completely screwing us over and, losing. unfortunately, a seat that he could have won, or I believe Erica Smith would have had a much better chance of winning. So sadly, I'm not surprised about Emily's list. It's sad. I wish we had, real organizations that had real power, that were willing to back progressives, and in particular progressive women of color, as they run for these offices, because these are the women we desperately need in leadership today, because we need their perspective, their strength, and we don't have it. And sadly, the establishment really has all the power, unfortunately. We need to build it. Like what Senator Turner said earlier, we have to organize. We have to figure out a way to build power in a real way, because otherwise it's just going to keep happening. And I'm not okay with this keep happening. I mean, we need real change in Washington. We need real change in North Carolina. We need progressive agenda. People are suffering and dying out here. They're facing financial ruin, and going along with the status quo and just making little tweaks around the edges and, serving the moneyed interests isn't getting us anywhere.
Yeah,
In
well,
fact,
I've complained to you, Rebecca, about being in Asheville, which is supposedly so liberal, and the leading Democratic candidates for Cawthorn's seat, which is why I didn't vote for either of them, don't even support Medicare for all. As you know, I confronted Jeff Jackson when he was running for Senate, and he doesn't support Medicare for all. And they just don't get it, that unless they, adopt an agenda that's going to help people. We have people that are dying. Every day I read on Twitter that people are dying because they didn't, want the ambulance cost to even get them to the hospital, much less pay the hospital bill. But before we talk about, because Ryan, you and I talked earlier about how you were making some coalitions, because I do want to end the show with some hope. So I want to save that till the end. But right now I want to talk a little bit. Well, first, before we leave the Valerie Foushee, Nida Allum race, Foushee has a lot of prominent endorsements, and she has the endorsement of the incumbent, and she's got all this money.
No, she doesn't. She has the endorsement of Butterfield. David Price has actually stayed out of this race.
Yeah.
G.K. Butterfield, unfortunately, has not done the same, and he has endorsed Don Davis.
And Valerie Foushee has also lost some very prominent endorsements, and I'm not just talking about us. Former Olympic athlete and federal judge, and now Representative Marcia Fudge withdrew her endorsement. So major problems.
Representative Marcia Fudge revoked her endorsement. Yeah.
Wow. So what's happening? Do you think that Nida can pull it off then?
I think the goal right now, having spoken to a lot of the campaigns, is keep Valerie from hitting 30%. And force a runoff, because while this is the most expensive primary in the history of North Carolina by far, because solely of Valerie taking outside money.
Yeah.
She doesn't actually have a lot of money herself. So if it goes into a runoff I think if it's a runoff against Nida Allum, then she's just going to get millions and millions more. But that gives Nida time to do a ground game. If she goes to a runoff against someone else, I don't think any of these groups are going to back her, because they don't care about her. They want Nida to lose. And Rebecca, what's your analysis on this? We haven't had enough time to talk about this lately.
I definitely think that Nida Allum, being a Muslim woman, absolutely has something to do with it. And I say this as a progressive Jewish woman myself. I think it's really important to speak out in support of Muslims and Palestinian human rights, which we'll talk a little bit about later. I definitely think that has an impact. The problem is there's many good progressives in the race, and I think it's going to split the vote. And so it's possible we'll have a runoff, but I think it's going to be difficult. Unfortunately, I think if there were less people in the race, it might be easier. But I think there's going to be a split of the progressives, and that's going to lead the way for Senator Foushee to win. That's just my prediction.
Yeah, well, that's what Jeff's term more robust coordinated effort. When you coordinate something, you've got to, like I was hoping that some of the Republicans around here challenging Madison Cawthorn would drop out, and favor the best one. And of course that didn't happen. And that guy deserves an entire show, but actually doesn't deserve any more airtime at all. But hopefully, I just want to announce to viewers that I actually voted for the first time in 42 years in the Republican primary. And I only voted for that one office. I voted for Wendy Navarez because I met with her for an hour, and she actually supports Medicare for all. I mean, she can't say so, running as a Republican, but, I was so excited about it. I called Wendell Potter and said, would you come out here and do a town hall? Because if we can get a Republican to support Medicare for all, that'll make national news and the money will start flowing in. But, she did say that if elected, she would be the first Republican to sign on to it. So anyway, probably.
That's really good to know, Lauren.
Yeah,
we got to follow up with her.
There's hope.
She is probably going to lose because she didn't raise enough money. And because Cawthorn decided to run in that other district, which, those maps didn't get approved. So then he came running back to his own district. But once he left the district, we got these other establishment candidates in, like Chuck Edwards, who's just a garden variety horrible Republican. He's not a crazy extremist, like Cawthorn, but it's probably going to be him and Cawthorn in the runoff. But let's talk about Erica's race, because I think she has a greater chance to win. One, she's got the endorsement of a lot of groups and individuals. She is running against this anti-choice guy at the worst time ever to be anti-choice. So why don't you give a little bit of intel about her race? And because they spent money against her. I don't know exactly how much money it is, but I'm just wondering, do you see there on the ground that it's making any kind of difference?
I think it's going to be different. The Erica Smith-Don Davis race is going to be different because Don Davis is not as well regarded as, say, Senator Valerie Foushee. He's not super well liked because he's taken stances against the Democratic Party in the North Carolina General Assembly. So there's that. Also, the Congressional 1st District is a much bigger, in terms of how many counties are in it, district. So I really do think that a ground game is going to actually be really important there. And it seems that Erica Smith definitely has a better ground game and that she has been focusing on those outside counties, some of the outer sort of rural counties, because it's a very large district. And so that's why I definitely think Erica Smith has a better chance of winning. I'm really hoping she wins. I just remember when she was running for Senate against, Cal Cunningham for the Tom Tillis, to take on Tom Tillis. And we were at this state executive committee of the Democratic Party, and they basically had like candidates come in and they gave them like a minute each, right? And it was like run of the mill. Erica Smith came in and literally in 1 minute had everybody on their feet. I mean, that's when I first really got to know her. And then she met with me and my colleague, Wamik, around Medicare for All, and really listened and asked excellent questions, and then absolutely decided that that was something she was going to support. So she is a progressive. She's also willing to learn. Her just who she is, her resume is pretty amazing. So I'm hoping that these attacks don't work. I really am. The whole thing about the Republic, her supporting the Republican, she spoke out against the party after the party screwed her. And that is an unforgivable offense, sadly, in a lot of cases. And so
I think Nina's done that too.
Yeah.
And that's
again, it's speaking out because they didn't treat her right. I mean, they didn't give her a chance to actually run a real race. And so anyway, I think she has a really good chance. Like I said, I was very disappointed that Butterfield backed Don Davis and didn't just stay out of the race. I thought that was pretty horrible. I actually was very heartened that David Price did not do the same, but G.K. Butterfield actually endorsed in our race and endorsed, Valerie Foushee, which is not surprising at all. They've known each other forever. I'm hoping for Erica Smith. I don't know what's going to happen. It really is up in the air. And I think this speaks to the fact that we've had, between Butterfield and Price, they've been in the House of Representatives for decades and decades. And so the fact that these two seats became open, which is why you had so many people running for them, in particular in District 4, which is where me and Ryan are, it's because these opportunities don't come around, because as much as Congress as a whole has a horrible, horrible favorability rating, we have, like, incumbents rarely lose. And so whoever's going to, especially in safe districts, and so whoever's going to win this race has a chance of, you know, staying in office for quite some time. And it's much more difficult to, it's much, much more difficult to run against a Democratic incumbent if you are a progressive. That is very much frowned upon, as we know.
Yeah, well, you're dealing with, and you know what? I'd like to say it's because it's a purple state. You know, I say purple because you've got a Republican legislature, but you've got a Democratic governor. Even in my old Democratic state of California, where we had a 3/4 majority, you didn't even need a single Republican to have a tax increase. We still couldn't get our Medicare for All bill passed. And I worked on 3 of them, 2004, 2017, and then again last year. So
it's the influence of money in politics.
Right.
I mean, that's what it is.
We couldn't get a ban on fracking, and the chair of the Democratic Party signed the pledge saying he wouldn't take fossil fuel money, but then he took money from Sempra Energy and he tried to parse his way out of it by saying, oh, they're a utility company. They don't actually extract fossil fuels. No, they use fossil fuels though. So anyway, let's talk about some of the Israel-Palestine issues, Rebecca, because we've gone way over the hour and I want to make sure we finish this in an hour and a half because we only have 8 minutes left. But Rachel Rosen, who was with the APAC PAC, there was a big article, and I don't have time to get into the whole thing, but it was an excellent article in The Intercept about how some progressive Jewish groups are really rising up against this. And J Street, for the first time, which is the alternative to APAC, although they're not as radical as Jewish Voice for Peace, which unabashedly supports the BDS movement, and they support a one-state solution. J Street is sort of moderate. They still want the Jewish state to exist, but even they are so appalled by the way these groups have been going after these progressive women of color and, using almost white supremacy, racist tropes. The author of the article mentioned the concerns raised by Jewish Americans, and she said, we're not a Jewish organization and don't claim to be. We are an organization of pro-Israel Democrats. So I think that's the crux of the whole thing. That's the crux of the whole thing. They try to say when anyone opposes Israel that they're anti-Semitic. They throw out that all the time. And yet they don't even care about Jews because, Rebecca, you and I can say this because we're both Jewish. We're both Jewish, and yet our Jewish values are to support the underdog and to support the oppressed. And right now in the current situation, the Palestinians are the ones who are oppressed, and that's why we support them. And, they can't call us anti-Semitic. They can call us self-hating, and they probably would if they were watching. But, it's so clear that this isn't even about, Jews. And I'd like to know, when did Jews substitute their entire set of Jewish values, some of which I mentioned a minute ago, for supporting Israel, no matter what Israel does, right or wrong? And that's what so many of the Jewish community, and I think that's changing with younger Jews. Yeah. And so that's why you see some of these resolutions. And I want to close the show talking about some of the resolutions that you've been able to get passed and those that you have not been able to get passed on behalf of the Palestinian cause.
Yeah, the Palestinian cause is just a very difficult thing to talk about. exactly for the reason you talked about, because you get the anti-Semitic thing thrown at you. Listen, anti-Semitism is real. It's on the rise. It is not good. Okay, that is just the truth. But also oppressing Palestinian people and keeping them in apartheid-like situations is also not good. And they deserve to live in peace and freedom as well, and dignity. And they are not right now. So I just want to make that clear. But yes, I think there's a lot of progressive Jewish people. Their voices, like normally what the mainstream media does, those voices never get heard. You only hear the sort of APAC voices that are really, really loud. Yeah, so interestingly, the resolution, so the Democratic process has, the Democratic Party has a process where you can put forward resolutions. And I was asked to sign on to one that this man, Tom Trueblood, put forward. And it was really against the anti-BDS, trying to shut down freedom of speech, trying to stop people from boycotting Israel because of their treatment of Palestinians.
I
And
think specifically, let me just add that I think what it is, and there's 35 of them that have been adopted. They tried to do it in California, and we stopped them. We watered it down so much that the original author took his name off the bill. But the bill, I think, says actually that if you're a company that is participating in the boycott, let's use Ben & Jerry's, for example, because they refused to sell their ice cream in the occupied territory, that you cannot get a state contract with North Carolina. So that's what it specifically is. It's interfering with that corporation's right of freedom of speech. And we know since Mitt Romney that corporations are people, my friend. So obviously they have free speech rights. Ryan, you want to say something?
Only when they support Republicans.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So anyway, go on. You managed to get that one passed. That was good.
yeah, that one was good. But again, I think that one was a freedom of speech issue, very clear. It passed with 85% of the vote, although it was not very easily passed. It was the folks in, the chair of the Platform and Resolutions Committee tried to block it, and only because someone introduced it sort of from the floor that it was able to be voted on. Unfortunately, that's another issue. We have someone who is the chair of the Platform and Resolutions Committee here that blocks progressive resolutions from even being considered. And it is, he's a roadblock to progress. I'll just say that. And that's a whole other story. But yeah, there's several other resolutions that have come up through different counties that have tried to look at, so one was...
We'll talk about the Betty McCullough bill, the resolution to support Betty McCullough's bill, which basically said aid to Israel should be conditioned on, how they treat the Palestinians, home demolitions, land grabs. Talk about that resolution and what Kathy Manning did.
I am not sure which one you're talking about. The ones that I have is the resolution to protect academic freedom, the resolution to end apartheid in Israel, Palestine, and the resolution to commemorate May 15 as Makba Remembrance Day. All of those were called anti-Semitic, and they were not allowed to move forward. And again, anti-Semitism is a real thing. And by throwing that out when anyone questions the brutal treatment of Palestinians by the Israeli government, that actually waters down anti-Semitism and is very, very dangerous. And we have to get away from doing that. Look, I'm going to say what I feel about President Biden or whoever. We should have the right to do that. And certainly, for a foreign government that's doing these things, we should be able to have the freedom of speech to speak out against it, and should not be called anti-Semitic because of it. And I think that that's really important.
Well, if you don't know about that one, I can speak a little bit about it. Ryan, do you know about what happened with Betty McCullough's, the resolution to endorse Betty McCullough's bill? Because I'd rather you tell it, but I do know what happened.
If I've learned anything tonight, it's that you know far more than I do. So I'd rather hear you say it.
Well, all I know is that Betty McCullough has this bill that, Code Pink and a lot of progressive Jewish organizations have been trying to get as many representatives to sign on to as possible. And basically it conditions our ridiculous amount of aid to Israel that we do every year, which they turn around and use to buy our weapons. So it's a taxpayer bailout of the weapons industry, if you will. That money should be conditioned on, the fact that they're demolishing homes, the fact that they're illegally stealing land. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, Blinken and Biden were tutting over, this is bad. You shouldn't be taking that land. They never do anything about it. They just tut. And so anyway, this woman who had the resolution, it was in the jurisdiction of Deborah Ross. So Deborah Ross allowed Kathy Manning to speak against this resolution for 3 minutes. And apparently the proponent, the local person, only got 1 minute and the resolution failed. So then talk a little bit about Kathy Manning. There was the Intercept article about how she tried to put pressure on the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, to not have that course. The graduate student was teaching the course on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Did you study up on that one, Rebecca?
I think that's one of the ones one of the resolutions that came forward. People say the proponents of free speech and academic freedom until it's something that they don't like or want to hear. And that is just wrong. Kathy Manning, just for your listeners who might not know, is a representative herself, and Deborah Ross is also a representative, and they're not in the same district. So the fact that Kathy Manning came to talk in Deborah Ross's district about this and was given more time than an actual constituent speaks volumes. But it doesn't surprise me what happened. I don't know exactly what Kathy Manning did, but obviously she is a strong supporter of Israel. She gets AIPAC money, by the way, so does Jeff Jackson. And so she's going to be very, quote, pro-Israel in her mind, which means that we're apparently not allowed to talk about the atrocities that the Israeli government is actually perpetrating against the Palestinian people. Yeah. And that's just wrong.
Yeah. So this woman, whose last name was Broderick, was a graduate student. She was teaching a class called the Israel-Palestine conflict. And they were pressured. And of course, it didn't work. She's still teaching the class, so that's good. But it came out that Kathy Manning, who I think is part of the Jewish Federation, which is a major mainstream Jewish organization, had placed a call to the chancellor or whoever to try to get, this course dropped from the curriculum. And the other thing was the Canary Mission, which is this, you want to talk about the Canary Mission, Rebecca?
Yeah, so I just recently found out about this, but apparently it is an organization that creates a blacklist of, like a McCarthy-esque, like what you said, blacklist of student activists that are, supporting Palestinian rights, and to the point where it can ruin their future. It's sick, honestly. And there's a really interesting article that talks about the nefarious funding of it. And it's like this shell corporation that is their headquarters is in like an abandoned warehouse or something like that. It was like, read like some sort of weird,
They couldn't find a volcanic island.
Yeah.
Right.
The Forward, which is a very progressive Jewish publication, they did this expose, and they talked about how the Federation of San Francisco was giving them $100,000. And once that came out, the Federation withdrew their support. So that's good. But I want to just close with, let me just make one more statement about this anti-Semitic thing. You would think that they would be concerned about the Great Replacement theory, okay? We just had murders in Buffalo, murders of Black people. And this guy, you know, in his manifesto, he cited the replacement theory. And everybody remembers after Trump, you know, they had that rally in Charlottesville where they walked around with signs that literally said, Jews will not replace
us.
Right? So you would think that, you know, these groups that care about Israel, you know, would care more about something like this and the rise in anti-Semitism. I think it's up 34% this year, anti-Semitic actual acts. But no, it's like that woman, Rachel Rosen, she let the cat out of the bag when she said, we're not a Jewish organization, we're a pro-Israel organization. So this is a problem. Now, getting to the hope, Ryan, you told me something, maybe it was earlier today, I'm getting the days confused, in which you're making talk about the coalition that you're making and what you hope to accomplish.
Well, I want to reject the idea that I'm making it. I am part of it, and I am certainly very encouraging of people. But after the revocation of Valerie Foushee's endorsement and a huge amount of external hate mail, everyone in the caucus was really loving and supportive. But a lot of people did throw the anti-Semitic trope out. They did say all these horrible things about me, and there were some threats. And that's all fun and games. I mean, I'm a progressive leader in North Carolina. QAnon's already after me. Try that for a threat. But we got in touch with J Street, who's phenomenal. And I've also gotten in touch with the Sunrise Movement, a very, very active environmental movement, the Democratic Socialists, the Fight for 15, the Workers' Party, Down Home North Carolina, the Poor People's Campaign. And we were literally at a picnic the other day, all of the leaders hanging out and talking. And we all get along really well. And we've come to the conclusion, as Ziad of the Sunrise Movement, this is like, we can get hung up on the 1% that we differ about and fail the 99%. But if we do that, the 1% wins and we fail the 99%. So, and I was going to be like, yeah, you need to run this thing. And it is important because there are a lot of progressives out there. And even in rural counties, some of the most red districts in North Carolina have hundreds of progressives in them. So I want every person here to go out and do something, volunteer, activate, organize, join one of these groups, do something, because that's how we're going to beat big money. The way it's pulling out now is, as I said earlier, 10 people working doesn't beat $10 million, but 10 million people working beats damn near anything. So unite, organize, and fight.
Right. Very good.
Join the Progressive Caucus.
Yes, pcncdp.org.
Yes,
Plug.
please do. We really want to build power, and we want it to be, like what Ryan said, an intersectional, multiracial, multi-generational, multi-ethnic movement. That's the only thing that's going to actually win and build power and change the world. Yeah.
Now, that's a really great note. I should have ended on it, but I want to ask you about the Senate race, because as you probably know, I'm supporting Matthew Hoh, who is going to be hopefully qualified to run as a Green. And I cannot support Sherry Beasley. She has not had a single public event. All of her events have been private fundraisers or private events, and she's running on total identity politics. We already know from the Daily Beast that she does not support Medicare for all. As you said, Rebecca, I feel Erica Smith would have had a much better chance to beat her. You know, I helped finance a film about Charles Booker, who probably could have beaten, what's his name? Mitch McConnell, right? But they pushed this Amy McGrath, the fighter pilot, who they thought had all the bona fides, you know, the centrist Democrat, part of the military.
Who had zero charisma.
Right, and it was the most expensive race in the history of Senate races, and she still couldn't win. They cheated Charles Booker out of that nomination by in Louisville, which was his main city, going from 95 polling places to 1, and there was such a traffic jam trying to get in there. The film tells the story. By the way, a little plug for the film. I got an associate producer credit on it. It's called From the Hood to the Holler, and it's coming out in August. It's winning all the film festivals. But anyway, Erica Smith is like, you know, a Charles Booker type and like down home type. She knows that the concerns of rural Americans are the same concerns as inner city Americans, and she's trying to get them together. So I think she could have won. But, you know, the Democrats, like you said, Schumer keeps putting in these people. Val Demings, I think, is going to lose horribly to,
Marco Rubio.
Rubio? Yeah, that's who she's
Yeah.
running as, Rubio. And here in North Carolina, we have the Republican between the Trump endorsed guy, Bud, I
Ed
forget,
Bud,
Ted Bud, and
our former governor, McCrory.
yeah, who doesn't seem to be doing so well. So, you know, what do you think? What do you guys think is going to happen in the Senate race?
Honestly, I have no idea. I really don't. You know, I just know that they did clear the, you know, it's funny. They actually, you know, took some of the people out of the race, and there's still like 12 people running on the Democratic side, and there's like 14 people running. Again, this is because incumbents never leave. And when they do, it opens up this space, and everyone wants to try to, you know, get in, especially as we know, the Senate is very, very powerful. But it's very difficult for progressives to run Senate races because they're incredibly expensive. You have to have a statewide apparatus. It's just very, very difficult. I commend Charles Booker, because he seems to be doing a great job, you know, running in Kentucky this time. And I hope he crushes Rand Paul like the bug that he is, you know, so let's hope that happens. But, you know, this is the thing. I think Sherry Beasley has as good a chance as any. I think it is a total toss-up. You know, is she the candidate I would have chosen? Probably not. You know, am I going to try and do everything in my power to work with her and push her to support progressive policies? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the salient point, is the mainstream party of the Democratic Party, as disorganized as it is still organized enough that it has this power. And I can say, without giving too many names, that sometimes there are successors chosen. I know for a fact Valerie Foushee has already chosen who's going to replace her when she stops running and who she's going to endorse. And that's set up. I won't name names because I happen to know them and be friends enough. But this is the thing. Progressive groups have to organize so we can have the same level of power, so we can have this infrastructure, so we can have the people on the ground and the dollars in the bank, so we can fight these assholes, and so we can actually do something. Because for so long, we've been put in a position where, well, they've got the ground game, they've got the bank account, they get to play politics. Well, we have the choice of, oh, we'll run a candidate in the primary, they'll get crushed, and then we have to fall in line because, God damn it, I'm not going to ever vote for a Trump Republican in my life.
Well, vote for Matthew Hogue. That's what I'm going to do. Now, let me ask you something. What percentage of your time on the caucus do you spend working on statewide races and statewide issues versus these federal issues and races?
Me?
Yeah.
I got into this as a policy writer. I'm the least of the activists, so I've kind of had to force myself to become like this activist, to work with the media, to give interviews, that kind of thing. I want to sit at home and write policy and do research. As recently, I would say probably about 30 hours a week is spent on this.
I don't mean your time. I'm talking about how much time does the caucus your activities? Do you focus on the state legislature and state candidates, or federal issues and federal candidates?
So that really will depend on the chapter. The state caucus spends almost all of its time dealing on the state elections. Local county chapters, like I used to run Durham County, Rebecca runs Orange, do spend a lot more time on local. I know Durham is spending a huge amount of time focusing actually on the school board election, because Republicans are trying to sneak people in to take over the school board. I will say our Supreme Court elections in North Carolina, I think, are actually the most vital ever.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Please find out who the Democrats are running for Supreme Court. The only reason we're not in a worse position here in North Carolina is because the Democrats can still control the Supreme Court by one seat. And we cannot let that change, because we will be completely screwed if that happens. I completely agree with Ryan. And unfortunately, the judges are usually the races that the people know the least amount about. And I mean, the good thing is what you were talking about earlier, Lauren, about consolidation, that none of the Democratic Supreme Court judges are running opposed. So they're not even on the ballots because people that are running unopposed are not on the ballots this time around during the primary. So as you will see, if you go to vote in a Democratic ballot, that they're not on there, but that doesn't mean they're not running in the general election. So keep a lookout for who those folks are. Please support them. Support them with donations, with canvassing, phone banking. Could not agree more with Ryan on this one. We have to hold on to the Supreme Court. I mean, right now, Phil Berger Jr. is the Chief Justice. He is, the son of Phil Berger, the Senate pro tem president of the North Carolina General Assembly. Very powerful, very conservative, and just bad news for anything we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I'll point out, he recently said, in an actual opinion, this isn't something made up, this isn't tabloids, you can look up his actual judicial opinion, that because the North Carolina Constitution does not contain the word fair, there is no requirement or expectation for fair elections. Please think about that for a second. He literally said, in a judicial opinion, that there is no requirement in this state for fair elections. And if we don't win both Supreme Court seats, he's in charge.
Right. And we also know about the Republican attempt to politicize all the Secretary of State positions and the local election official positions. And that's what,
The judges were never a partisan race before. I mean, they were publicly funded in North Carolina for a couple of years there. They totally, overturned that, made it a partisan race, basically took away the public financing and totally messed it up. But even with that, we managed to take over, and the court has done some really, really great things. And we have to keep that going, and we really have to flip the General Assembly. I'm here as an individual, not as a representative of the Justice Center, but I do state policy work. And, as long as the GOP holds the majority, it is going to be almost impossible for us to do any of the things that we want to do, that we need to do on a state level in order to help North Carolinians across the state.
All right. Well, on that note, we got to let it go. And I want to invite you guys back for future shows. We can talk about what's going on with state politics and state policies, because I'm very much interested in policy too. And I think we need to organize more around bills, than candidates. And we need to mobilize our grassroots groups and our activist groups like you were talking about, Ryan. And we need to do that statewide. Some of the turnout we get here in Asheville is very low and discouraging. I was kind of thinking that, for progressives, there's a lot more going on there in Raleigh-Durham. But this is where I am, and I'm going to help. So anyway, thank you for standing by for such a long show. And those viewers who stood by and watched the entire show, thank you. Please share this show. If I can ever figure out why my iMovie hasn't been working since November, despite multiple calls with Apple support, I will be able to edit this into just the North Carolina portion of it. I think I may have to buy a new computer in order to do it. But anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Ryan and Rebecca. And share this show. I'm going to post the links to the articles that we referenced in the comments, and keep fighting.
Amen. Take
Thank
care,
you.
and thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.